welcome to What Anime Taught Me About Kubernetes and Tech Careers. You have chosen a great place to be. Soon it's lunchtime. This is more of a relaxed, more of a fun session. So hopefully you get to have a bit of a break and maybe learn something new, but also just maybe relax a bit as well. So who here feels that they are familiar with anime? So like you watch some at least, like raise of hands. Good, we have a good number, then you're gonna be perfectly happy, hopefully, because I think there's like a Venn diagram of like Kubernetes and anime, and if you know both of them, as I assume the people who kind of raise their hands, you're in a Kubernetes event, so likely you know kind of both, you are in the perfect place, you are gonna have a good time, welcome. If you know Kubernetes, but you are not familiar with anime at all, awesome, you're going to learn more about anime. So sit tight and enjoy, and it's going to be great. And if you know nothing about anime or Kubernetes at all, which would be a bit odd maybe in a KCD event, but nevertheless, if someone's here to learn, then you might be a tad bit confused, don't worry. But you will probably learn a lot about both of them, so it's all good. Welcome as well. So who am I? Just to kick us off, I'm Annie. I'm a CMO at Vision. Vision has a booth there, so if you want to know about Vision and services that we provide, you can always go there, chat with our lovely folks, as well as me today there. In addition to that, I'm a CNCF ambassador as well as an Azure MVP. And those two essentially mean that I just love speaking about Kubernetes, cloud, and cloud native in general, and love to share my passion with others around it. Now, I'm also a Kubernetes and CNCF meetup co-organizer for over 5 years now for Finland. I live in Zurich, but I'm from Finland, so that's how I got started there. I also coach early stage startup, and I co-host a Cloud Gossip podcast, as well as I'm in the KubeCon program committee as a track chair or as a program committee member in general, as well as I've been hosting Cloud Native Live for over a year now, a weekly CNCF live show every week. Now, this is all fine and cool, but I think for this session in particular, the number or the statistic that matters the most is that of anime series that I had finished at 100 mark. After that, I was like, I don't need to bother anymore. It's just a bunch, essentially, at this point. So one could say that I definitely have over 10,000 hours in that you need to be an expert on the topic. So that's my credential for today, for this session. So about this session itself, originally it was created for the KubeCon Valencia 101 track. So it's a beginner track for Kubernetes enthusiasts. So that's the kind of idea here. We're going to go through the basics of Kubernetes through an anime lens, as well as have fun and hopefully relax a bit, as I said in the beginning. So that's the goal here. Now, we have an agenda as well. Every serious session has one. So introduction is what's happening right now. And we are very happy because we are pretty much done with it. And now we're going to move on to Barely, If All Illustrated Anime Fans Guide to Kubernetes. And then we're going to have Kubernetes components. And then 11 lessons learned from anime. And now, why is it called Barely, If All Illustrated Anime Fans Guide to Kubernetes? Because I've essentially kind of thought it through the illustrated children's guide to Kubernetes, which you can see here. It's a great resource it's meant for children to learn Kubernetes. And I was perfect audience for this one, but essentially I was going through it and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of like, I can see anime here and in general in Kubernetes. And it is the badly illustrated one because, obviously, I haven't made like illustrations for it, but we're gonna get through. So let's get started. So I think you can imagine an anime main character, the ones who are familiar, but I think you can imagine also quite generally any hero in the world who are they're trying to find their footing, they're trying to kind of find their place in the beginning of the story before their, momentum's arc starts. It's a scary world they're living. They don't kind of know what they're doing yet. So they have a lot of things around them. They are kind of surrounded by different people, different things, but they are kind of also not happy with being surrounded by things, and they are alone. So these might, be an example from the anime world. You could have Naruto. They start off they're finding their place in their school before they start their career in American football. Or it can be Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion, where they're kind of, really trying to find their place in the world. So how does this all then relate to Kubernetes or technical things? Well, I think this is quite similar to, to a world before Kubernetes and containers. So if there would be, you could imagine that there was once a simple app, for example, a Python app. They were a simple Python app, and they had one page. They shared an environment with other apps that they did not know and did not want to associate with, as our heroes here as well. They are kind of in this world, they're figuring out what they're doing, and they hope to have an environment to call their own home. And that app then, has all the basics that a Python app, for example, would have: web server, readable file system, Python runtime, and so forth. So the app that's kind of like surrounded, but alone, no kind of collaborating with, are similar space as in our anime heroes here. So now what's the next solution, logical, where our little Python app or our little anime heroes are going to find? They're going to find containers. Because the chance of a lifetime comes, you get accepted to Shinobi school, like a ninja school, or American football team. You kind of start to get your footing, but things are not quite perfect. So this is what a container is, for example, as well. So a container provides an isolated context where the app, together with its environment, can run. So isolated containers often need to be managed and connected to the outside world. So there's still a bunch of challenges happening. But, as you can see here, our little ninja Naruto is going to school, and they're kind of starting to understand what's happening in their world, and then, kind of getting into the happy place in the container. Now, getting part of the bigger picture, they need to start moving to the next step, so Kubernetes. They start practicing their skills, and then eventually, as you can see here, Naruto, for example, joins the team of ninjas that they have around. So essentially, a single container is no longer just alone. They're actually working together with multiple containers or ninjas, as you see here. So it's multiple apps from a distance, but it looks like one single thing that then works. So this is Kubernetes, essentially. So that then is about container orchestration and building a robust platform for running thousands of containers in production. So as you can see, multiple things working together. Now, you obviously need labels then as well. So as you progress in your journey, all the anime hero team, you're going to start finding your own place in the world. So for example, here is a medic, or you can have different roles. So coach, medic, or One Piece has all of the different map reader and whatnot, these kind of things. So Kubernetes uses labels as name tags to identify things, and it can query based on these labels, and labels are open-ended, so you can use them to identify roles and stability and other important attributes. Now, then we have pods as well, which is, in Kubernetes, pod represents the runnable unit of work. Usually, if you have a single container inside a pod, but there are cases where you might have more inside the same pod as well. So it's the smallest deployable unit of computing that you can create and manage in Kubernetes. And now, as you can see here, this is the smallest operable unit essentially in the Ninja world. So you have this team together working here, and they can kind of work together as well. So as you progress through this world, you obviously need to learn skills as well. So what are the important skills that a ninja or a shinobi in the Naruto world need to learn? Obviously, cloning techniques. So you have replica sets, which is, essentially the same. So you need to learn to clone yourself in order to take on all the various enemies that you face. So replica sets provide logic for scaling the pod up and down, and it can be used for rolling deploys as well. And I think actually it's really similar here to how Naruto has done here and cloned themselves there. But obviously, you cannot just survive on your own, which is the cloning techniques and then forth. You need services as well, so you need to connect with other people. So as here is a village, so this team that our heroes are, they need to connect with the villages, so they need services. So for that, each pod has their own IP address and changes that need to be made and so forth. So the service gives stable IP that can be used consistently there. Now, as you progress, you're going to start accumulating a lot of different, gear and whatnot. So obviously, that's kind of obvious for ninja, hopeful, Narutos, and shinobis. You need to have somewhere to store your things. So you need to have somewhere to have your stars and so forth. And that is storage and volumes. So we'll start needing storage and volume. So this is where they come in. So they are a separate object that is mounted to a particular container, and it can be mounted by a different path, and it can be mounted to a particular container at all. So it's really helpful there. Now, as you move forward, you might realize, okay, interacting with all your team members is great, but you might need some meditation piece and whatnot. So this is where namespace comes forward for our little Python app. So you need a little bit of privacy, and you find peace and kind of calm within yourself, so then you can work better with others, as well as Sasuke is doing here by meditating, because I think working together with the team members can also be a bit of a hassle. Now, as now we are nearing the end of this barely illustrated Anime Fans Guide to Kubernetes, you are ready to go forth. Put on your gear, and our little ninjas or shinobis are ready to take on the world, as well as, you know, our little Python app. They have all the things that they need. They have everything from Kubernetes, containers, namespace, storage, and so forth. So now they're set. Moving forward in the agenda, as promised, introduction done, barely all, Now we're going to move on to Kubernetes components. Just a quick rundown of them. So this is an image that I think probably here everyone is familiar with. So a Kubernetes cluster is here. So it contains a set of worker machines called nodes. And it also has then the control plane components that then kind of mastermind everything and make the global decisions about the cluster. And the nodes are the ones who are doing the heavy lifting and doing the work. So how does this then work in the anime world? What's the equivalent? Well, we can see here. So we have, for example, here control plane, which would be the team leader, and then they're telling the little nodes, so Naruto, Sasuke, and so forth, to go about and do the heavy lifting in the world. Another, I think, an even better example of this would be the Japanese task force from Death Note. So you literally have L, you know, kind of commandeering from the up, from the control plane side, and then you have the task force members there kind of working there. And as a bonus, I put the Hokage there as the cloud provider API, because it's kind of then the next level of things there. Then I think this is not applicable for everything, because as I think in the previous example, the leader is really giving the rules, the control plane, but in this one, Luffy doesn't really, no one kind of really listens to him most of the time. So it's not always applicable, but sometimes it works. Sometimes they don't listen to their captain. Now, then we have the lessons learned from anime, which is then a general part more. So the team has come up a lot today. So we've been talking about, you know, the team as different structures, and that's really important in the Kubernetes and anime world as well. But outside of the technical details, as we've been kind of talking today, is also super important. Like if you're part of an engineering team, to work together, and you become more than the sum of your parts. So as you can see here the one piece, the straw hats. So they are, as any team, they have different roles. They have someone who's a medic, they have a captain, a cook, and so forth. So that's the same for engineering team. You need someone who's working on different side of things and who specializes in things. Now, in the worst case scenario, sometimes in the tech world, you might be looking for teams that are, or not teams, or people that might have a lot of skills. And then you might end up with this. So if recruiters are looking for someone who knows this long list of things, then you're essentially looking for something that's not really a person. It is a team on itself, so it's an IT department alone. And we know from the previous image that team is the one that's important, not, you know, just one person who suddenly has all of these skills. But don't worry, Anime World has a solution for this. So if you really need a miracle of a full stack developer, no worries, you just, you know, combine yourself into one and become one big mecha. But is this really doable? Not really. And I think it's also, this is why the team is so important, because we can't really, you know, attach our legs and whatnot together and so forth. But yeah, after this, I think it's a common trope in anime world to have a lot of characters that have like mysterious past and dark past. So Sasuke here is a great example of that. So they are a bit of emo, they don't say much, they almost never smile, and they're kind of, I don't want to say cold-hearted, but they're kind of, a bit on the darker side, I guess. And these characters have become hardened because of their tragic past. But they also have a lot to contribute to the team. I think no one can kind of really deny that because of all the hardship that they have gone through. So they've learned a lot, but they're a bit moody and they do their own thing. So obviously, in the team that you have in the technology world, you might have a lot of these as examples as well. So, for example, mainframe coders could be one of these that have mysterious hardships in their past, and but they have a lot to offer, and they are really cool as well. But you need to work with all of these different types of people. Now, another super important thing, I think, across anime is self-development. So if our heroes are starting to try to beat a villain, they're trying to defeat some huge hero, villain somewhere, they need to go kind of through multiple rounds of fighting to fight the big bad guy and really develop themselves and level up really fast and efficient as well. So usually in anime world, the answer is to go into a cave or into a time machine of sorts that kind of warps time, so they can kind of emerge super strong. So what would be the equivalent of this in the tech world? Well, I think one good example is buying a ticket to KCD Zurich and coming here, immersing yourself into the sessions. This is even a dark space, so it's kind of cave-like. So you're going to then emerge with all of your new skills, and you're going to, kind of level yourself up. And also a good example, I think, are certifications. What could be better than, kind of doing a new Linux Foundation certification, and then you can literally showcase your talents, which obviously is represented in the anime world as well, because if anyone has watched it, you know that every time that they level up, they get new crazy hair, they get new clothing, and all of these kind of things. So, and also, actually, if you go to a conference or one of these, KCD Zurich, for example, you usually get swag as well. So you literally emerge from here with new pieces of clothing and new pieces of identification to say, I learned, I was there. So I think it's quite equivalent, actually. And I think the importance of that is something that I think at least I've learned from anime as well. Like, okay, how do I kind of move to the next level, and how do I level up my skills and so forth. Now, another important thing along all of these things that's happening where you're leveling yourself up and so forth, we have, you have to take time to relax. Now, every anime usually comes to the point where, well, usually it's manga is kind of taking over somewhere, and then you need the filler episode, which is usually a beach episode or a similar. So that's why you have to go to the beach and you need to take some time. And I think particularly, it's, it always sometimes feels high stakes in our tech world, jobs and whatnot. But if the anime heroes can take a time off and just go to the beach and enjoy some volleyball, I think we can take a holiday, we can chill, we can take an afternoon off here and there and kind of really take our time to relax and enjoy our time. And I think another thing that really helps kind of see this as well could be the filler episodes work in the same way as feature freezes. So when you need to pay back technical debt, aka catch up with the manga, so you're not running over there, you need to take some time off. You need to make sure that all the plot lines are being made and so forth. So it's good. And now, when you're kind of taking your holiday and you're kind of yourself developing yourself, I think one thing that you need to work on, you need to be ready for everything that comes to you, and then obviously you need to be always prepared. Now, in almost every anime, this also happens. So someone jumps out the window because something bad is happening somewhere, and they really need to get somewhere. And I think this is really important to be prepared in the tech world as well. It kind of goes into the same world as having monitoring and visibility and alerts really well set up. And also, I think the important part is because setting up proper monitoring and alerts is important, so that you know when to be prepared and when you kind of jump out of the window. But also, I think the key here that we can learn is actually the jumping outside of the window, because that means that you're taking action. So you're not, setting up alerting and monitoring and you're like, okay, that's cool. But then you're actually kind of, okay, taking action when you see the alert. You know how to jump out of the window and get things done. Now, another point I think it's important is the importance of documentation. So obviously for documentation, you need to let your team members know what you're doing and the historical context for it, so that everyone knows what's happening in your code, for example. So what can we learn from the anime world here? Well, usually the anime heroes always yell out their moves out loud, very loudly. So I think documentation is essentially the same as, if you were in the room together developing, you could just yell out, cube settle, so forth. Maybe not exactly the same. And also I would like to point out that I think for the anime heroes to yell out their moves in front of the villains before they're making the moves is a bit ridiculous, because then they know what the move you're making. But I think the good part is that if you're part of an engineering team and you're yelling out your moves there, there's no enemies, there's no villains, no one can hear what your next move is, even if you yell it out loud. So there's never a reason not to do documentation really well there. And I think a part of really important part of anime world as well as the tech world as well is enduring in long fights as well. So you can see here, Dragon Ball Z is legendary for the fact that the fight scenes might continue for ages and ages. And I think in the Kubernetes and tech world, we are no stranger to that either. You need to have stamina to have long fights, long sprints to make customer happy or your boss happy and so forth, and really grind through those hours. So those are really important as well. And now when you're attending these kind of events, you kind of come in, you learn a lot, and then you observe and get a lot of info. And you're like, ooh, I want to try that CNCF project. Oh, I need Argo. I need, Linkerd, Istio, all of these kind of things. And then you need to kind of start using them. I think it's good to keep in mind not to also take it too far and become the monster that you despise. Because this is another theme in anime where you have essentially heroes that then, if they kind of push the boundary too much, they kind of then end up becoming the enemy that they're trying to defeat, for example. So really, in the tech world, it's kind of the same as when the complexity becomes too high, hard to manage. You have to kind of really think about your environment as well as your architecture. So, for example, if you have multiple service meshes, you might have to think about leaning that in a bit, because you might become the monster that you despise. And now, next up, I think, is a very familiar topic to everyone who has dealt with anime or Kubernetes. And it's a principal theme that runs through both of these worlds, and that is ridiculous power scaling. So we have here, it's over 9,000. And I think if there's one thing that Kubernetes is known for, high availability, high scaling, and all of these kind of things. So it really fits well together there. And I think it's good to remember that you can do high scale and it's fine, and you can kind of auto scale and whatnot. So we can learn that from the anime world as well. Now, next lesson is an important one, a quick one, but an important one, which is always have a snack at hand. I get at least really hungry, really easily hungry, so it's important to eat and have a snack at hand, as well as here we see our anime heroes learning the same thing as well, and it's always a thing that where you need to remember to eat properly. So that is definitely something that we can all learn from there. But now, the most important lesson for sure to learn is to believe in yourself. And I think that's a very kind of common theme across all of these pieces of content, and really kind of believe in yourself and take yourself to the next level. And now, if you start feeling like you're losing hope, you're starting to feel like, oh, I don't really know, should I do it or not? No worries, if you learn from anime, then you're just gonna have to go Super Saiyan and go to the next level by this. So start, go yellow, flash, and then all of your problems will be solved. And now, if you take it too far, if you really kind of, train too hard, take your self-development, endure all those long fights, no worries. The worst thing that can happen is that you will become the most powerful being in the whole universe. You might lose your hair in the process, but that's totally fine. You are the most powerful being in the universe, so don't worry about it. Yeah, but thank you. It's been a fun time. I hope you all enjoyed. I can take questions as well, but usually the questions are like, what's your favorite anime or whatnot? And I'm happy to answer those as well. I'm sorry? Yes, I know. This always comes up first. It's a hard one, honestly. It's the hardest question to ask. I like, let's say, I do love everything by Makoto Shinkai, you know, like when you got the artsy stuff and whatnot. I do have a very big soft spot for Bleach in my heart because it was one of the like original ones, as far as I'm concerned. And Dragon Ball Z was the first one as far as things I was watching, kind of like the full arc of things, essentially. And I think there's a lot of good ones. For sure. I think it's too many to name. It's awful. But there's a lot. I think every genre has their own thing. That's good. And Death Note is a classic as well. Always good to rewatch. Any other questions? I'll be at the Vision booth if you want to ask anything there. Thank you.